Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Select Board's call to order December 22nd, 2020 at 6 p.m. Ways to join this webinar is join by computer or mobile device and click https://zoom.usj, I-9/3310251775. Go ahead.
You can just tell people the webinar ID number.
Okay, is that enough? Okay, the webinar ID number is 933-1025-1775, or by phone 929-205-6099 US. So I'm going to take a roll call. Sheila?
Here.
Mike?
Here.
Pat?
Here.
Ed?
Here.
We're all here. Okay, great. So tonight we're going to be talking about, we're going to have a workshop for the short-term rental ordinance, proposed ordinance. And I have a few comments I want to make before we move forward on that. And I have a few points here, so I'll read them. Tonight is a workshop for the Board of Selectmen. Like all Selectmen meetings, it is a public meeting. The Board of Selectmen will be discussing the ordinance amongst themselves to develop their draft for public input at a later date. We want to thank everyone for their input to this important topic. We have received emails, letters, phone calls, in-person conversations, many of them. We take all these feedback seriously and are weighing it as we balance everyone's needs and concerns in drafting this ordinance. This is the 6th time we have met on this issue since August. The Board of Selectmen have discussed short-term rentals on August 13th, August 27th, October 8th, November 12th, December 10th, and now December 22nd. We really want to be transparent, and we've done the very best we possibly can. We want to make clear that we are not trying to eliminate short-term rentals. We understand that it is part of Kennebunkport, but believe it should be regulated. And I believe all 5 of us believe that. Also, we are not taking away any people's rights to rent the properties. We're attempting to regulate short-term rentals. We will propose an ordinance, and our goal is to have the town vote on one ordinance in June 2021. The ordinance will go through legal review with our attorney. We'll hold a public hearing on the ordinance so that people can give their input on the document before the voting. Tonight, our goal was to give enough feedback to the staff in order to develop the ordinance for the consideration. So that's that in a nutshell. And tonight, we should be talking about trying to get some idea on the how the cap will be formed, registration, license, who can register, enforcement, which is a very important part, and fees. So maybe we just should start talking about cap levels. What do you think, guys? We haven't really got into that, and I think it's very important that we do. Mike?
Just a couple of points. Can I just reinforce some of the things you said as well, is that, which were very good, and that is that there is a real misconception out there that people who are currently have STRs, short-term rentals, will not be able to get register and get a license, and that's absolutely not the truth. And the other part of it is that the realtors who have sent letters to us, which we really appreciate as well, have said that that's going to put them out of business. But all we're saying is we're just going to register and regulate short-term rentals. We're not preventing them from managing them. So that leads me into the cap thing, and a recommendation for a cap anyway. We did get a letter to from, I got it right here from Ed. I don't have the cover letter, but we did get a letter from the attorney today, who marked up a proposed ordinance, and I appreciated it about what he said, and he had some things in there about caps. And I just want to say this, that we appreciate everybody's input. We've had a lot of input. We appreciate what everybody has said, but we don't necessarily agree with them. And so there are some compromises that have already been made and some that will probably be made. But as far as the caps go, we've got a good feel now after perusing the internet and also talking to the state of Maine for registered sales and use tax numbers in 04046 and 04014, that we probably have somewhere, we don't have an exact number. So for those people who want an exact number, we don't have one, but we are pretty much concluded that we have somewhere between 400 and 500 short-term rentals in the in the town of Kennebunkport, which includes Goose Rocks and others. So it's not a small number, and it's a fairly high percentage of our inventory of housing in town. So it's approaching 20%. So it's fairly substantial. So let's say it's in the 15 to 20% range. So what my feeling is that if the ordinance passes in June, and I expect that it will, it'll be that we will have some registration period probably to the end of the year that will require that anybody who would like to be in the short-term rental business in Kennebunkport would apply for a registration and a license, and that we would accumulate those and see what the totals end up being. And what that does do is allow anybody who meets the deadline and registering to go ahead and apply. And those people who currently have short-term rentals and can demonstrate that they are in the short-term, have been renting in the short-term rentals. And I want to get back to that in a minute. But they are eligible for a license. So there's nobody that's being, as far as I can see, being squeezed out. So I think once we get the absolute number of registrants, hopefully it'll match what we have for numbers. And then we'll go from there as far as setting the cap. And the cap, I don't think would be set. So my feeling is that the cap wouldn't be set so that nobody then could get a license in the future. But we're going to have to take a look at all of that. So that's my thought on how we go about doing it. And getting those numbers and getting a registration and getting licenses issued or a number issued, and then see how many there are, and then establish the cap after we do that. That's my suggestion for recommendation to the board.
So on the cap thing, so you're saying that after everybody that is eligible to get a license because they've been doing this for a year or two or whatever already, that you would like to see some extra licenses being able to be passed along to some people that haven't started it. Is that correct?
I think we take a look, exactly. And okay. I think we take a look at the number, and we're not here to put anybody out of business. We're not here to necessarily, be the police of how many we can have and so forth in the future. And we know that there'll be others, but when we get to the question of transferability, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, but that's the way that I would recommend that we look at it. And rather than just say, okay, we've got between 400 and 500 people right now, we know, and that we don't want to just say, okay, then here's 400 is the cap, and then we find out that there are 425 people who are currently renting. I think when we do the registration, though, we're going to have somehow these people who are registering for a license or whatever you want to call it, registration, that we need to be able to find some way, either a proof of having rented for the last year or two or something, the year 2019 is not a good indication of proof of rentals, because we know that a lot of really concerned renters in town, because of COVID, did not rent their units in
You mean 2020, Mike?
Pardon?
2020.
2020, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I've been writing too
From
much.
19 to the 21st century.
2019 would be a fair
Hmm.
valuation, and then 2020 would be. We know that there is a lot of concerned people that did not rent because of COVID, so there has to be. So we have to probably look at 2019.
Makes sense.
That doesn't answer the question, though, of the people who have mentioned that that they bought their house and they are have redone their house and they bought it with the intention of renting, and they did not rent this year because of COVID, but they had every intention of renting. So I think we're going to have to talk long and hard about that. It's not our intention at all to say, hey, look, and there were 2 or 3 of those individuals. So I think we need to also talk about that. But that would be my recommendation to the board for discussion, for consideration on how we go about establishing a cap.
Any comments?
I'm fine with that, Mike. My only concern, and I'm sure this is your concern as well, is when we start talking about people who didn't actually rent their home in 2020, say they bought it in 2019 and fixed it up in 2020, is that we are truly including people who intended to do that, and not people who think that there's some value, whatever it is, monetary or otherwise, to having one of these licenses and have a gold rush on the licensing system. That we truly are capturing people that had that intent, and not just people who are looking to get a license because they think that it'll be worth something in the future.
I'm open to any way that we come up with. We want to have an ordinance that is, number one, we know what's going on, but we want it to be fair. So we've always said that. I know some people probably don't believe that, but it's true. So we've got to discuss that and find a way to do that. Anybody?
So what about transferability? What about?
Well, that's the 4 issues that, as you mentioned, that came out of this, that I think when I look through, I want people to know that also that all of us, and I mean all of us, have read everything we've gotten. I think I added it up, and I've got 42 or 45 letters, and we have. I have read every single one of them. I have had any number of phone calls today. Up till today, and I think I had one today, but I wasn't home, and the person didn't leave a message. So, but I can, on your phones, you can identify. And I think I had a call from William Short. I think it was something that, but I wasn't here. So, but we've all read the stuff and the concerns that people have, and we've all taken them seriously. So I think they should know that. And now the other issue that we got to was caps, transferability, who can register. I think we just talked about that a little bit. And then the concern people have about penalties on violations. I think those were a lot of the things that came out. I would like to go back to the registration part, though, again, where we're talking about caps. And before we leave that and get to transferability, one of the things that we were, now I lost my train of thought. It'll come back.
You'll come back.
I've
Usually around,
read too much stuff today, you know, it's like,
usually around 2 o'clock in the morning, it'll hit you.
yeah, they'll come back. But it was a plan on caps, and I'll think about it and I'll come back to
You
it.
wanted to talk about who can register?
Yeah, we did talk about, it was the, we're talking about anybody who had, that can demonstrate that they have been renting, and how far back we go is the issue. The other part too is that who have been renting, and then we talked about the people who have had the intent to rent, and so those are the ones about. But who can register? Anybody in the town of Kennebunkport who? Hold on just a second. Somebody's at the door. I got to tell Janet. Hold on.
Hello.
Janet. Janet. Somebody's at the door.
So, Alan, we do have 70 attendees now. So
Good.
you might want to just let people who weren't here originally in the beginning know about the workshop setting and about public comment, because I see someone has their hand raised.
Okay, there's not, everybody, there's not going to be any public comment tonight, but you'll be able to go ahead and write us an email. This is just a workshop amongst the select board. It is a public meeting, but we're not taking any input from the public tonight, because we want to see if we can nail down a few things so we can move this along somewhat. But you're more than welcome to call tomorrow or write an email to Lori or all of us. Or if you just send it to Lori, Lori will send it to us for sure.
Could I make a point about that
Sure.
too? You know, one of the things that we had a discussion about was, and you people have, people in the public have mentioned about transparency and so forth. And the way that we could have done this is we could have had 2 selectmen work as a committee and come up with a recommendation and so forth, and we wouldn't have had to have a public meeting. But when we got together, all 5 of us and Lori and Werner, we decided that the best way to go about this would be to have a public selectmen's meeting so that the public could see what we're talking about, and that we were not coming up with something behind closed doors. So this is our effort to be transparent. But in order to do that and to get our points across, we are not taking questions. Is that okay?
Sorry.
Yeah.
And this is a common practice in Augusta. I've been to a lot of fisheries hearings, and they do the same thing. You know, the subcommittees meet and you can go and you can sit there, but unless they have specific questions of you, you don't get to talk. But again, to that point, I think Alan said this before, and Mike, I know you've said this before, we will have a public hearing on the proposed final ordinance that everybody will be able, who wishes to make comment at that time before the ordinance is published and sent to out for its final form for vote in June. So there will be other opportunities to speak to us on air, if you will.
I think, yeah, you're exactly right, and I appreciate that. At the end of the meeting, I would like to be able to give a synopsis of the schedule that we're looking at, tentative schedule that we're looking at, and then maybe we could at the end, sometime the next day or two, put it on the website so people can see what's coming up. I'm talking about the public hearings. I'm talking about the warrant. I'm talking about the whole schedule and how it comes together, legal review, so forth. So I think at the end of the meeting, if you want me to, I'll give a little bit of a recap on what I've put together and what we've put together actually. And we can assure people, like Ed just said, that they will be given the opportunity to comment.
One more comment. I think when this is all said and done and this ordinance goes out to the voters in June, this will probably be the most transparent piece of legislation that has ever been produced by Kennebunkport's Board of Selectmen. Because in a normal environment without COVID, we would have met in person. And many of the people that I see in the audience tonight, I recognize their names from the letters they've written us, and I know that they live away. They would have had an opportunity to watch us on TV, but they wouldn't at our other meetings otherwise, unless they came here, have an opportunity to speak and have their voices heard in real time. Again, we're not going to do that tonight because we need to work our way through this process. But this has certainly been a very, very open piece of legislation.
After tonight, there's going to be, everybody's watching, you say 70 people, and they're going to have probably quite a few questions after we finish this evening, and they'll be writing us emails or calling us and whatnot, and we'll keep moving it along for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I recovered my senior moment.
There you go.
Yeah. And we're talking about a compromise where we have compromised on the time of stay and so forth, the 30-day versus what we had in the beginning. And the other thing that I want to bring out about registration is that the way that I think we might want to recommend for consideration registering is that we allow the applicants to self-certify that they are meeting all of the requirements of the ordinance as far as the safety issues go and as far as everything else goes. And we haven't decided this. I'm just saying that as a recommendation that we could have them certify that they have met all of the requirements that end up in the ordinance. And that when they go to registration, they just certify that they have done that. And it would, number one, it would facilitate the registration. And it would allow us to, in future years, instead of doing inspections right now of everybody, which by the way, I've looked at actually 5 ordinances of local or areas around us, and a lot of them have very severe inspection requirements prior to registration and so forth. So if we can get people registered and then we can do random checks in the following years or whatever, and then I think that would facilitate the registration. I think it'd make people feel a bit more comfortable, and it doesn't mean that they don't have to meet the regulations. It just means that they're going to certify that's there, and that we're going to randomly audit in the following year. The other thing that does too is that there was a concern expressed by a number of people that they were concerned about their rentals for next year and not knowing. And, they're booked already and so forth. I understand that. I used to have a rental property up in northern Maine. And, but this gives them an assurance that by registering and so forth, if they're getting a license. Anybody now who is renting can get a license, and they should feel free, as far as I'm concerned, unless you people disagree, that they should be free to book for next year.
That was at the top of my notes for the night, right here. This will not affect the 2021 rental season. Right?
Exactly, and it shouldn't.
No.
So that's the way that I was looking at it and recommending that we go about this.
I think it'll make things a lot simpler for us. And for them,
sorry, Al. Go ahead, Al.
now, Pat, what do you?
Yeah, no, what I'm trying to do is keep us focused on the structure of the ordinance. And you, Mike, pointed out several things in particular that are important. And if we can go through this in such a fashion, one of the things you see in many of the letters that we received is they're worried about a cap. We've said we don't intend to have a cap. can we just make that very clear at this point?
We haven't
I,
said,
I don't think we said that
we
at
didn't
all.
say that, Pat.
You're not gonna have a cap.
No, we
No, we
intend to
didn't.
have a cap.
We
I-
do intend to have a
You
cap.
said you do not intend to have a cap.
No, we do intend to
We do
have a
intend.
cap.
Initially,
No,
that's
Once we
fine.
know who's gonna be, who can sign up and they get their licenses and then we're gonna see where we're at. And then once we know where we're at, we will be setting a cap. Yeah. But we're gonna get everybody hopefully signed up
Well, they've
before
got to
that.
apply, right? You want them to apply.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the application process, couldn't we ask them, are you a first-time renter? Or do you have a history? What's your last 5 years of rental history? I mean, I think that's fair. We don't need 20 years. Some people said, we've been renting this for 35 years or whatever. That's fine, but if we just say, what is your last 5 years? And you can prove that you've been renting it for 5 years, that's fine. That's all we need, I think, going forward.
I don't think that we need 5 years. I think several years would be fine. Would
3
be
years,
good.
a number.
Well,
Pat, what I had said in the beginning was we go back to 2019.
Okay.
Suggested, is what I'm suggesting.
So if they did not rent in 2019, but were intending this year and they got wiped out because of the virus, they don't have a history, is what I'm saying. That's why I was looking at them more than 1 year back.
Well, 2019 is history.
No, Mike, it's more than 1 year. If you did not rent in 2019 because you were fixing your house up to rent and you were getting ready to rent it this year and it didn't happen. So you have no history. That's why I said go back a couple of years so that people who have been doing this and renting in the past can show, yes, I rented in 2018, 2017, or whatever. Pick a number. I'm just trying to focus our attention on how we move forward with getting people to apply and what we're expecting to see when they
But we
do.
could also ask them if they could prove that they rented at least 1 year in the past 3.
There
I
you go.
think that's easier.
Yeah, okay, 1 year in the past 3.
You know, again, we have been, I don't like the word accused, but it has been suggested that, we're trying to stop people from renting their property who have been. And I don't want anybody to misinterpret us because we've made it a little onerous on them to prove their history. So if we were to say, for instance, if you can prove that you rented at least for one season in the past 3,
Well, that's fine. Let's go ahead and agree that this is what we're looking for on an application. So that, we can be assured that they're probably meeting the ordinance requirements for safety procedures, So-
Lori?
What about Bill?
Renter?
What about someone who just recently built? They have the same problem. They recently built. Their plan was to rent out this house, just like everybody else. Oh, I can't afford it. I need money for taxes, so I'm going to rent out my house. So what about the new builder? Can they apply for a license?
I would say so.
They can
Well,
apply
there's
for,
one way- there's one way that you can look at, I think we need to look at that. One way that you can do it is you can say that you had to have had a sales and use tax state of Maine sales and use tax number assigned prior to, let's say, January 1st or whatever the date is we pick. It's because there are going to be people who in 2020, as I said, didn't rent because of COVID. And there may be people who have didn't rent because they were fixing their house, didn't rent because of ready to rent, but didn't rent because of COVID. So we could pick a date that if you've had your Maine sales and use tax number by, pick a date, going back, then.
You can't go back beyond the date of today, I believe legally. If we want to set today the 22nd of December as our control date, I believe we can do that. I know the federal government does it all the time, in the fisheries regulations. So, and so does the state of Maine. But
So,
I think an easier one to follow would just be if you had a sales and use tax prior to January 1st, 2021.
so how about if you
Then you're
don't
gonna
have a
real
sales and use
rush for
tax?
people. Then you're gonna have a real rush for people
Yeah.
to get, yeah.
Well, then, all right, then let's make it today. Let's just make a control date.
I think we need to discuss that more, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I
So-
have talked to some people, and in my discussions, I said, well, if that's the truth, talking about people who had purchased homes with the promise, the idea that they were going to rent them, and then COVID kind of put the kibosh to that this year. I said, well, as long as you have your certificate, I think that is proof. I said, no, we haven't completed our ordinance and we're working our way through it. But I think if you show legitimate interest in renting and not just running out to get a license, as I said earlier, because you think it's going to be worth something, or you might want to rent 20 years in the future, those are the people that I want to see given a license in the first round.
So let's pick the date of, a suggestion would be January 1, 2021. Which I think what you said, Ed.
And you-
That was one of the dates, yes.
So Werner, what,
And
Go ahead.
so January 1 would be for the people who have rented previously.
Well, it would be everybody.
What
Yeah.
about new?
Well, they
They
should.
better get on it,
If they had the intention to rent, they should already have a number.
yes.
Okay.
so Laurie,
Yes.
Werner, have you enough information to put something together on the caps from us?
We can draft something.
Okay, good. So let's move on.
Okay. The
I
next,
think transferability is a big issue.
It
right,
is.
Yes.
So who wants to jump in on transferability?
well, I think the way we've structured the ordinance in this draft, it's way too broad in my mind. I'm not comfortable with virtually anybody that you met in the grocery store.
I agree with that.
It is, if, I understand ownership, and I value that. I think it's important to say, okay, I want to do this for my kids. Fine. But you don't have to go out your family hill
Family tree, right.
to the ends of the leaves and get everybody. So, keep it to the immediate family. That's my preference. Because if somebody wants this house to rent, they can buy it and they can apply in their name and get a license.
Or go on the waiting list if that's how.
Whatever, we don't know there's going to be a waiting list. We are
I
not,
agree.
we just don't know. So in order to be realistic about this, we can't plan for something we have no idea how it's going to happen, if it is going to happen. So let's just narrow this down to immediate family and say,
So who would be immediate family? Who would be in that definition?
That would be
Sons and daughters.
wife, spouse, husband,
husband, wives, sons, and daughters,
Right, that's it.
blood relatives,
yeah, includes stepdaughters or whatever, it's,
blood relatives, yeah.
your immediate family.
Werner?
Yeah, so one thing I think you do need to consider is that, you have a lot of properties that are in, estate plan, that are in estate planning trusts,
Yeah, LLCs, stuff like that.
and so I think that's something that you need to consider whenever you think about that, the transferability piece. A lot of folks have family trusts, for their estate planning purposes, and so you have trustees in there. I think you may want to consider that if it's, if you have something like that, that's in a trust, like if it goes from an individual, for instance, into some type of a family trust, that's not considered a change of ownership.
Well, in all these application letters, or the letters we received regarding the ordinance, I don't think I may have heard of one or two that were in a family trust that are in the short-term rental business. Maybe there's more. I grant you that. But,
I think there's a lot more. I think you would just have folks that are, the folks that are writing to you, they're representing themselves as individuals,
Right.
to you, because that's how you know them. You may not necessarily know them through the name of the ownership name of the trust, that we see, for instance.
So if the trust had a son or a daughter or a spouse, then that would be legitimate.
Right.
But why would anything else be?
Well, no, the question is when you're dealing with transfers, right? So say, you have property owned by Mike Weston, and then for whatever, if you decide to put your property into a trust, you may decide to call it, the MWK Porpoise Family Trust, for example. And so now all your family members are trustees in there. So the question is that something like that shouldn't be considered a transfer.
I gotcha.
Because you're just taking it from you and putting it into, into a family trust for estate planning purposes.
Perhaps we can ask Amy about
I understand
that.
what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, that's an Amy
That's-
question.
That's above our pay grade.
But I'm fine with, as long as it's going from one family member into a trust for other family members.
I think the important thing is just talking about intent, so I think what I've heard is that, you're talking about market sales, right? You're talking about that type of a transfer, is different than, going from one family member to another. And so I just want to be clear, like oftentimes you have properties that go into different entities, like a trust, and
Gotcha.
that really shouldn't be considered a change in ownership for the purposes that we've been talking about.
Okay. Anybody
And-
else?
While we're talking about transfers, there was a lot of, about the transferability of the licenses. That also seemed to really agitate people in their letters, as you all know, you read them. But the rationale behind that I think that non-transferable licenses is important is if we issue these licenses and we allow them to transfer to the next owner, then the town has created artificial value in the properties. And it is not our place to do that. If you have two identical houses that sit next to each other and one has a license to rent short term and the other doesn't, the one with the license will sell for a higher value. And
Many of the comments were, picking up on what Ed was saying, that the value of the homes are greater if you can rent. I think what is happening, and that's the problem that we're seeing, is that the properties are basically sold, and I know I'm a hotel owner, but I also live in this town. Properties are being sold to be used as hotels, and I have a place next door to me. It's a place that has right now probably 6 to 8 bedrooms, and that's what's going to happen over there. Is it's going to be completely rental. They didn't buy it to live, they bought it to rent, and this is what we're seeing. So some of the comments were, we're not getting young families in here. This is the only way young families can buy properties. Well, the reason that it's so high and they have to rent is it's sort of like a double-edged sword. One follows with Greg Dombrowski, I love what they're doing. You buy the property, you fix it up yourself, you rent it so that you can live in it at some point. That's what I don't mind seeing. What I mind seeing is the people who are buying homes and then specifically just for rental. They don't have any, desire to live in it. They just want to rent it.
As
So
one,
It's an investment.
yeah, well, as one of the commenters in our emails who was in favor of the short-term rental ordinance said, basically they're speculators, and with speculation comes risk, and sometimes that risk is that legislation, or in this case ordinance, will come and wipe out your asset. If you buy it and speculate that you can resell it as a rental property, well, that would be a perfect example. And if we don't allow for transferability, only the people or the properties that we give initial licenses to will be the ones in perpetuity that are rented. That would be very unfair to others who may decide in the future they'd like to rent their property and go on the waiting list and do their due diligence and wait their time.
And we might not even have a wait list.
We might not.
Once we find out how many rentals we have, we may not, it may not even come close to what we would have considered as a cap. And I have to say, from my gut, I always believed that if you own a property, you should be able to do with it what you want. I mean, that to me,
That's why we have zoning, Sheila. So you can't do absolutely. So your neighbor can't have a slaughterhouse, a junkyard.
Ed, I truly believe if you own a property, you should be able to do with it what you want to a certain extent. You're not going to put a pig farm in your backyard kind of thing. However, I think as selectmen, and I'm going to recuse myself because I have a conflict and I know that, but as selectmen of the town, I think we have an obligation to work with everybody, but also to keep the spirit of the town, not as is, because everything changes, but at least try to keep the spirit of the town the way we see it. As a local, as a small community, as residential neighborhoods, that sort of thing. It's a tough situation, and I'm torn. But anyway, go ahead, Ed.
No, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. You were lagging a little bit.
Excuse.
You got a delay. You got a delay, Sheila.
Yeah.
You've got a little bit of a delay.
Everybody's having a delay. Yeah.
But as far as the ordinance go, I mean, if we didn't believe that we had a right to do this, we wouldn't need to be sitting here right now. And a lot of people have said to me and said to all of us in these letters, well, why is this an issue now? And why wasn't this addressed when zoning came out? Well, the town was much different in 1972, which I think is the year zoning first appeared. And I know, having known a lot of those people from 1972, even though I was just a little kid, I'm sure that they would have addressed it. Now, how would they have done it? I don't know, but it certainly would have been mentioned in zoning. Who would have ever envisioned the internet? I mean, that's certainly what's driven all of this. If there wasn't an internet and people couldn't sit while they have their morning coffee, I've done this myself, to go on vacation and look on these websites and say, hey, that's a nice place, I'd like to go visit. And then you just go through and you find a place to stay, and it's all conducted virtually. If that didn't exist, we wouldn't be having this conversation either.
I'm fine with having immediate family. I think we need to understand the trust issue. And the other point that I like to make is that we're not preventing anybody from selling their property. I mean, they can still sell their property. It's just that in some cases, the license or the registration won't go with it. And that's the way it is, and way that I would see it. And the other thing I'd like to just say is that once somebody sells their house and that license is forfeited, because it's not sold or given to an immediate family, or whatever we decide about trust, that license now becomes an available license for somebody else, because it's within the cap. And it'd be a waiting list that is maintained at town hall and on the website, so you know exactly where you stand. And to me, that's the best way to go about it. And the other thing too is, there is an argument I've heard from a number of people, and I understand it, that, well, they won't get the value for their house if they don't have, their license doesn't go with it, or their registration doesn't go with it. But I don't agree with that in Kennebunkport. I think that in Kennebunkport, you're going to always get top dollar. And the other point is too, that these are businesses and we don't tax them as businesses. And that's just the way it is. So that would be my recommendation. But
Thank you for mentioning that.
yeah, we don't tax them as businesses, and they are a business.
I know.
So
I know.
I understand what they're saying, but I don't. This is one of those places where I don't agree with the license going with the property.
So,
I have another question. Are we done with that? Because I want to bring it up, and I don't think we've talked about it yet.
what with transferability?
No, this is how we would deal with multi-units is what I
Well,
wanted to discuss.
Well, let me ask Laurie and Werner, do you have enough to work on the transferability issue? Did you get enough feedback from us?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we're good on transferability. I do have a question on the sales tax forms, if I can go back there for a minute.
Sure.
So I have been told that some people who are renting their homes are doing it through real estate agents. And so they don't have their own sales tax form because their agent takes care of all that.
But the state of Maine requires it for all properties to be identified. I've been through this.
Okay, I'm giving you feedback from a business owner who does this for many properties.
Well, then
So-
I think.
And what we were told by the state is that sometimes they do have a conglomeration payment for many homes when we were talking to them.
They have a payment, but they still, I mean, I had a gendarme knock on my door when I didn't know anything about this way back when, and was told that, every property that rents in the state of Maine has to have a sales and use tax number. And so I would imagine that I would guess that the realtors have some way of identifying that. I don't know. We need.
I'm sure the realtors could provide,
I think
verification. I'm just saying that's something I wanted to make you aware of from feedback I'm getting.
Yeah.
And so we need to work that through.
Okay, I appreciate
The state has pretty
Werner?
good records because back when my wife and I were doing short-term rentals on our own property, one of our properties in town, we also managed some for friends of ours, and we were investigated by the state of Maine because we did not have the certificates for them. We had to explain to the state that those individuals held their certificates. So the state certainly knows who's doing what, or at least they were, and that's back in probably 2010. So I'm sure that they're even better at it now because it is a significant source of revenue for the state.
Werner, you had a question? Or an answer?
Yes, so I'm just kind of walking through some of the practicality here. So the ordinance, the draft ordinance says license is good for a year, and so we've talked a little bit about, what happens when a property transfers. So I think it's important just for you all to know, like when property transfers occur, there's certainly there's a lag time, for us to receive notification when property transfers occur. And so, oftentimes that information is, comes to us a couple months, in some cases after a property is transferred. So I'm just, I'm just talking through how that, may practically work out. If ordinance says that it's good for a year, but property sells mid-year, and then you've got a couple months before we actually get notification that, a property is transferred. I think, and just a thought that if that license is good for a year, perhaps the registration, for the next year is considered a new registration, so if you've got a new owner that decides they want to apply, that, that's a new registration as opposed to a re-reg.
But
I don't
would,
see the problem. I guess you're losing me. So there's a
Well-
lag. There's a lag.
Right. So what happens in that lag time, that time frame? Is it invalid? Is the property invalid?
It's
the
invalid.
license, the license should be under the owners, whether it's
Right.
LLC or whatever the family name is. If the house is sold to an outsider, that the people who own the property have to let them know that the license doesn't go along with it. I mean, I would imagine that that's part of the sale. So,
The realtor should let them know, that's for sure.
yeah. So I think that's sort of a moot point.
Well, that was why I was asking the question.
Yeah.
Any more questions on transferability? No? Okay. So how about we talk about fees? We haven't really talked about that. I think we ought to talk about it somewhat to see where, do you think that we should have just one fee fits all, or should we have a tiered fee? What do you guys think?
I was thinking a tiered fee, and that would kind of get into the question that I had about multi-units.
Okay, that's right, you wanted to ask about that.
Well, that's okay. I mean, that really wasn't something that we'd identified before, but I think it's something we'll have to deal with. But a tiered fee would be better because some people have 1, 2, 3 bedroom units, and some people have 8 bedroom homes. And I don't think the people at the bottom should be paying the same as the people who are, bringing in a larger income from larger homes.
So would you think that, say, the first tier would be 1 to 3 bedrooms, and then after 3 bedrooms would be the second tier?
Or yes, yeah, that would work.
What's
I don't
everybody
know,
else
have
think?
2 or 3 tiers. I'm not exactly sure how many bedrooms some of these places have. I bet there's places that have 6 or 8 bedrooms down in Goose Rocks or,
Well, that would-
anywhere here in town.
Right, but that would take care of the second tier. You'd have 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
So, or 7.
But what about-
What's everybody else think?
Yeah, a tiered approach is appropriate because it does put the emphasis and the expense on the multi-unit,
Mhm.
the way it should be.
And what about places that have more than one structure on a piece of property? We received a letter from somebody at Goose Rocks, and I can think of another one here in Cape Porpoise, and actually I can think of several where on one lot there are several cabins or structures, etc. And should we issue them one license and charge them one fee? That may be a third tier if you have multiple structures.
What if we did per bedroom?
Well, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, if you've got cabins, say, the cabins probably only have 1 bedroom.
But
So you
usually cabins, aren't they commercial,
I don't know. I'm talking about
Werner?
Yeah.
property.
So Werner, if we were talking about, the only one I can think of off top, 4 acres down across from the Fireman's Park in Cape Porpoise, Werner, you're familiar with that?
Yep.
So is that commercial, would that fall under our short-term rental, or do we manage them under another ordinance?
Yeah, so what we've been talking about here has been for regulating residential dwelling units, okay? And so we wouldn't consider those cabins there as residential dwelling units.
Okay.
You know, that would fall into a, it would fall into a commercial classification that wouldn't be subject, you know, to this ordinance.
How about Porpoise Place?
So Porpoise Place, now those are, you've got single family homes there, okay? And so those would be regulated under this because they're dwelling, you know, there's two buildings, they're each on their own parcel, but they would be considered a dwelling unit. And so
So
it would
they
be-
are
would be
each on their
subject.
own parcel.
That's correct, yes.
So that brings us to the question of, would they have to apply for two separate licenses? And I mean, this is a question for the board, of course, but
I think they would if they're on two pieces of different property. I think they would have to have two separate licenses.
Yeah,
yeah, I would
I
think if they have two separate tax cards.
So the way this is structured so far, you know, we've been dealing with units. And so, you know, you have a lot of different scenarios in town, probably for the most case, you know, you've got a singular unit per property, you know, that's the most typical. But you are going to have situations where you have, multiple units, per property. And so I think how, the direction that this has been going is that if you have multiple units per property, let's just say you have two houses on your lot, you've got an old grandfathered lot that has two houses on it. So the way that, the draft is written so far, those would each be a separate unit.
So would you envision that they had two separate licenses?
That would be two separate licenses.
Okay. I'm fine with it as long as we have, clarification when it comes to registration.
I just want to make sure that whatever fee we come up with, whatever structure we come up with, is that we assure everybody that it's not the taxpayers of Kennebunkport who are going to be financing these short-term rentals. That's all. That the fees are going to pay for whatever costs the town incurs to administer the short-term rental ordinance.
So I don't see how we can come up with a fee yet. We have an idea, but I don't see how we can tonight come up with a fee structure until we find out how many units we have.
Well, then we have a chicken and an egg situation.
Well, I think that we can set the structure, how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that we need to find out different scenarios before we can set a fee. But if you think that we can set a fee now and then move it on to look at it, talk about it, I'm fine with that. If you guys have any ideas what you think would be fair and equitable.
Yeah, I mean, I have ideas, but again, it's difficult in the absence of data because ideally I'd like to see, as Mike pointed out, I don't want the taxpayers of Kennebunkport to be burdened with this ordinance financially, but at the same time, I don't want this future boards to think this is some cash cow that they can keep raising the fees and extort money from people who are renting out their properties under the ordinance.
I think we just take our time here and come up with what we think our one-time costs are going to be, and then what our ongoing costs are going to be on an annual basis, and come up with some kind of reasonable fee based upon the data, some of the data that we have now of the approximate number of units, and we can adjust that if we have to on an annual basis. We can look at it that way. But we first of all, we got to know what our costs are going to be, and what it's going to. And we have an idea, but we need to sort of hone in on it. So,
Mike, how do you feel
Yeah.
about having an application fee? $100, $200 initial application fee plus your license fee, and that's it. Once you paid it, you've paid it, and that kind of covers some of our upfront costs.
Well, the other towns do that, and the cities, and they have fire inspection fee, processing fees. There's a number of different fee schedules, but somebody was just talking about units. And of course, Portland is out of our league a little bit as far as it goes, but they have a different fee structure for going up to 5 units. But it's not what I'm proposing. I'm just saying that every one that I've looked at so far, I looked at the ordinances so far, have a fairly consistent process by, they got to pay for the inspections, they got to pay for the fire department inspection, the da-da-da inspection and so forth. Something we haven't discussed, having our fire department do inspections. But and I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying that that's what some of these other places do. So
I'm all for keeping it simple.
Right.
yeah, I think the simpler the better, because I think the more you get into it, it's just, I like the idea that Sheila said about maybe by bedroom or something,
Mhm.
and go at it that way.
Yeah, I would think a 1 or a 2 or possibly a 3-tiered licensing system would work. And when we issue the licenses, if you have a tier 1 license for 1 to say 3 bedrooms, your license number starts with a 1. And if you have a tier 2, it starts with a 2, and that would make for very easy enforcement. Anybody who sees the license online can just simply match up the number with how many bedrooms there are. If the town chooses to do spot inspections to make sure people are in the proper license category.
So
I
we've
think
got, go ahead.
I was say, I think maybe we should keep it 1 or 2 bedrooms, and then 3 to 4, or maybe 3 to 6 bedrooms, because obviously a cabin that has just 2 bedrooms isn't going to draw the amount of money as a 3 to 4 bedroom place is going to.
I like your.
I'm just.
I like your idea.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want the person at the bottom. A lot of letters that we got, I take them to heart, in the sense that, I understand what they're trying to do and hold on to their properties by renting them out. And as we've all said time and time again, we are not trying to take that away from them. I guess the only thing they could accuse us from is taking away the ability of the next person who owns it, if it's not a direct relative, to do that. But I think we've addressed that pretty well. So I don't want to see the people at the bottom paying the same fee as the person who's renting out 8 or 10 bedrooms.
Exactly.
So Laurie, can you give us some direction on that? You've heard what everybody said. We want some different types of fees for however rooms that they're trying to rent. Maybe you guys could get something back to us on that.
And keep it as simple as you guys think you can.
Keep it simple with tiers and bedrooms. Gotcha.
Yeah, right.
So let's move on to enforcement. We haven't talked anything about that to speak of. Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I would like to.
Okay.
We got a marked up ordinance from Keith Zakarin.
Is that the guy from San Diego?
Yeah, but you read through it. I agree with some things. I disagree with some, and that's the name of the game. But I think it's worth looking at what he wrote for suspension and revocation of registration, and taking some parts of that and seeing if that fits. If you read through it, I don't agree with it 100%, but there are items in there that I think could be useful to the renters and useful to the town. So just something I think maybe we want to take a look at, unless we're in agreement with what we have already written.
Well, are we talking
It pretty much follows a lot of the things that we have already, but it's got a couple of little twists in there that I think worth discussing. Maybe when we go into whoever's preparing the draft, I think it would be better, rather than go through the whole thing here. But I just want to acknowledge that we have it and that there are some things in there that I think are worth talking about.
Maybe you and Laurie and Warner can talk about that if that's okay with the rest of the board. And then when it rolls out again, we can have an open discussion about it. Because I think you've got a good head for this, Mike.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, I do. And I want it to be clear, but I don't want, again, I talk about future boards. It could be this board. I don't want things to be arbitrary when it comes to enforcement of this. And I also think, Mike, that you're not going to sit down there and write down everything that's a class A, class B, class C, or however we decide to classify these things as a violation of the ordinance. I think a lot of common sense needs to be used.
In reading through a lot of the, in particular, the Old Orchard one, and I would say, Old Orchard and South Portland, they have some very pointed violation rules and so forth. And also they have, reference to their current ordinances, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, there's a number of different levels of what's a class A, what's a class B, and that kind of stuff. We've really got to, it doesn't want to be arbitrary. It needs to be based on the ordinances, and it needs to be based upon the good, I think the good nature, the good neighborhood.
policy? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that should be written in as an exhibit into this and so forth. I know we reference it, and I think we need to maybe even put it as part of and that was also suggested, I think, in his markup. And I think that would be a good idea to be there. So
Laurie, could you put something together for the enforcement
Mike says he'll help you.
ideas?
Yeah, so I just want to give you some feedback on the enforcement piece. We did originally in the first draft have it more specific, kind of a 3-strike provision. And feedback we got back from Amy Chow was that she was concerned, as I think we all discussed, that not all violations are the same. So for example, if I'm renting without a license, or if I am having loud parties and cars all over the street, versus I forgot to have my trash cans brought in. Those are examples where just because it's a violation, they shouldn't necessarily all be treated the same. And Amy was also concerned that the selectmen not have language that was so restrictive or deliberate that you weren't able to make decisions based on the evidence before you. And that there are levels to take. So not just revoking a license, but maybe suspending it for a period of time, And I guess the question is, how comfortable are you with that? And I agree with you that I think a lot of what we've heard is people's concern of understanding what those rules are and what would be considered a violation. And so giving some good examples of that, because nobody likes surprises, and people want to understand what the rules are. And like you said, not be arbitrary.
And you got to give an opportunity for them to cure them as well.
Right.
I mean, to fix whatever has been complained about or whatever, whether it's a safety item or it's a exterior noise thing, whatever. We need to give an opportunity to cure. We can't just go and snap.
Right.
I agree.
I agree with that. Yeah. So what else would you guys like to talk about tonight?
Well,
Is there anything else?
Dinner?
So what are we going to do from here? A suggestion was made at one of the last meetings that we maybe have two selectmen work with Lori and Werner and develop a draft. And,
That's fine. I think that's a great idea.
and having said that, we have to look at our schedule. And this is where I said I'd like to make the public aware of what the schedule is, because of what the town schedule is for town meeting and so forth. So we're having the workshop today. And what I was suggesting is that if we can get together, work, and maybe by the 10th, these dates are not set in stone. I'm just suggesting. The 10th of January, we have some kind of a draft together. We then need to give it to legal review and return. And I was looking at maybe a week later, the 17th of January, if we could get them to take a look at that and give their comments. And then the selectmen workshop to maybe have another workshop to finalize the draft if we need to. I have a question mark on that, the 21st of the month. But we have to get a draft to the town clerk by the 29th of January. That's set in stone. So there has to be a draft on the 29th. Then all of the ordinances, including the dog ordinance and everything else that's being proposed, and this ordinance has to be presented to the for a public discussion and input at the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 25th of February. That's the Board of Selectmen reviews all of the ordinances changes that are submitted to us on the 11th of February. And then we would have, as we promised, we would have a public discussion and input at the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 25th of February. And then the town attorney will suggest changes and would present to us again on March 11th. Final draft to the Board of Selectmen with last minute changes on the 25th of March. And the Board of Selectmen sign the town warrant on the 22nd of April. So there's key dates that we have to meet so that the town can do what they have to do. So we have to structure what we're going to do in between. But we did promise to have a public hearing for the ordinance for the short-term renters, and that would take place on the 25th of February. So, and I'll give this to Lori, and she can, whoever, and if this is what we want to do, then there's no reason why we can't put it on the website so everybody can see what's coming down.
Lori, what do you think about that? Is that doable?
Yeah, I think the challenge is sometimes the legal review, depending on how busy people are, but yeah, I think those are reasonable timeframes.
Okay,
Well, we could actually go almost 2 weeks because we don't necessarily have another workshop to finalize the draft if we already have a draft that we're going to submit to legal. And then the time for input would be on the 25th of February.
Yeah, and I would think the most legal review or the most potential changes would be in our first draft.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
okay.
And,
So
and
that's-
let me also just say, if we haven't come to a good conclusion by the end of January or mid-February, it's not written in stone that this has to be voted on in June. Maybe and I'm just throwing this out because I'd rather not rush through this and get it right than to try to get it done because it has to be done for June. So I'm just throwing that out.
We'll have had almost 11 months from the time we started this to the time June rolls around. I think we can get it done. I would like to think so.
I agree too. Yeah, I agree.
I'm just saying if we don't, or if we're not satisfied with it.
Okay, is there anything else that you guys want to bring up on short-term rentals tonight?
No, I think we've had a very positive discussion.
I think we have. I think we've done a really, there's a lot of
Right.
questions answered. pretty happy about
putting
it.
it all,
I'm sure there are going to be people who aren't happy. There's going to be people that
Yeah.
are, and so, but that's the way it is.
We
Nice.
know they can go ahead and write emails or call us or whatever else, whatever they want to do with the questions and everything, comments. And we'll definitely read them and talk about them. Is there anything else on this? Or
Yeah, I'd like
go
to-
ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I just want to encourage everybody, because everybody's going to have some thoughts and input. And it is much more efficient to have them write them down, and send them in, so that we can then send them out to everybody, rather than have a dialogue with everybody along the way. It would just get wrapped around the axle and you'd never get to where you want to go. So tell them to write it down, send it in to the town, and so we can collect them together.
Emails are the best. They are, because they'll get to us quicker.
Right.
Okay, other business. Is there any other business tonight?
Not tonight for me.
Okay. How about a motion to adjourn?
Motion
We
to
got
adjourn.
a 9 a.m. in the morning one, right?
Yes,
Right, yes, yep.
it's on the
And
warrant.
then I'll need some people to come by and sign the warrant.
Yep, we'll do.
I'll be around tomorrow.
We have a motion to adjourn, right? I didn't hear a
Motion.
second.
I made it.
I have a
Second.
first and a second, and I want to thank everybody tonight for watching us, and we will appreciate your comments for sure. I have a first and a second. I'm going to take a roll call. Sheila,
aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Alan says aye. Motion carries.
See you all
Thank you.
tomorrow.
See you in the morning.
See you in the morning.
You guys have a good night.
Good night.
Night.